Hi, this is Graphically Alex coming at you with all things fat related. If that's something that interests you, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. And today I'm going to try to see. I don't know if I can finish this today. It just depends because sometimes at the end they just kind of have like fluff and stuff where they're not really saying anything. And you never know. They might trigger like a whole discussion again. But here we are. We're back. Let's see what they got to say.
Areas of my life where I felt like I mattered more with the weight loss, where I felt like I got more positive reinforcement with the weight loss. And I had to mentally do my whole bubble thing often, of reminding myself you hold worth regardless, reminding myself you're in charge of what's happening here, because it 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 can absolutely, I can see why people have weight loss surgery and then lead to eating disorder, because of how much praise you get for losing a large amount of weight quickly.
Well, and I think too that I think what it ultimately boils down to with like good fatty and bad fatty.
Well, I think that it's really, we already got to start doing some corrections. So when it comes to EFOL by the letter D, when we're talking about, she's like, it could be the surgery leads to this, da, da, da. Typically, and in most cases, especially if you're super morbidly obese, so I'm talking about very, very big people, okay? And I think it's important because a lot of you guys were, like some of you guys were commenting on the last video, you guys were like, well, there's some aspects to what you're talking about that I also do, but it's not, I've never been diagnosed and blah, blah. Remember, it's always a gradient. It can always be subclinical. And it can always just be you just are one thing out of a pile of things that are involved with the disorder. So just if something resonates, it doesn't mean that you necessarily have it. When it comes to very, very big people, obviously these things happen often enough and to a deep enough level that it's very clear that they do have it. And like I said, I think this episode that I've covered, it's just been, in this podcast in general, maybe a very good example of a very severe level of B followed by E followed by D, or as I call it here, toxic ritualistic behavior. Which especially leans towards that side, as that's the side that I had. I never had the restrictive side, but there's a lot of overlap too, which is fascinating for sure. But remember, if you have one thing here or there, it doesn't mean that you have it. It has to be a lot of stuff sustained. There is diagnostic criteria. There's all these different things, but you can still have some negative aspects or not realize maybe somebody around you has it or had it and you learned certain things from them too. Like it could be that simple, because you have to remember within the disorder there's a reinforcement and an externalization that occurs. So it's important to understand you may not have it, but maybe somebody around you did or does, and you learn certain things. It really depends. But as I keep saying, if you're very, very, very big, you really have to question it, because it takes a lot to sustain such a huge size. It just does. I've sustained a very big size. At my highest, I was 383. That is very big, and it took a lot of calories to maintain that. It takes a lot. And it's just, you really need to consider, in my opinion, if you're like 350 plus, you really need to consider if you have the disorder. At other levels, you may have a different type of one. You may not have one. You may just not be healthy, right? There's a lot of different aspects. You have to kind of look at it and realize that these are all shades of gray. It's very much a spectrum on many different levels. Like there's a spectrum of the disorders and a spectrum of severity. And if you're really not severe at all, you might not, it could be like subclinical, or you just do certain toxic ritualistic things here or there, but it's not super bad. You have to understand that. So just be aware of that, it takes a commitment to be very, very, very big. Like there's usually something going on, whether it is a EFOL by the letter D or it is just severe hormonal disorders, right? Like very drastic things are often required to reach that point. That's all I can say because it is a drastic position to be in. So, yeah, I hope that that's clear. I'm trying to make that more clear. So, yes, if you do certain things that I've talked about, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have it. It just means that there's something you probably shouldn't be doing, you know? And just think of it that way. So, let's go ahead and continue.
A bad fatty does not put their worth in their appearance, right? Does not put their worth, either has learned or just says fuck it, I don't know, but like when I think of myself, like I definitely am not a good fatty. I'll be a bad fatty, that's fine, because I no longer place my worth on the size of my jeans, on the however many, fruits and proteins are on my plate, however many, whatever number says on the scale, my worth is not tied up in that anymore. And I think that's a big part of it, is like understanding that it's just detaching. It's detaching and understanding like our bodies are always going to change, right? Our bodies are always going to change. People's bodies, everybody's bodies are always going to change. And you can fight it if you want. That's fine. But like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but death is coming for all of us, y'all.
Yes, so I guess it really boils down to that level of argumentation when it comes to EFOL by the letter D, when it comes to drastically overeating, toxic ritualistic behaviors. Her answer is we're all going to die anyways. That's pretty bad. So, I mean, our bodies all change. Do they all change to that extent? Or is there something that we're doing that is leading to that? Because no. I do think, especially in America, it's very easy to become obese passively. Like passive obesity is definitely a thing, but it's still usually tied up in either being overworked or lazy. I mean, we have to bring back the L word. It does apply to a lot of situations within obesity, especially class 1, because you don't have to like have a serious issue to be obese. You just don't. You can just be kind of like, you don't think about it that much, or you just kind of overindulge, just kind of more typical stuff that we see in America. Maybe the food is not as nutrient dense or it's not as filling, but people are still choosing to buy certain things like that, like potato chips are one of the biggest weight gain foods you could possibly do in America. They're not filling at all. The types of oils that are used are not filling. So it's very easy to drastically overeat chips, for example, and that's something somebody could passively do while watching TV every few days or something, and they just kind of put on some weight over time. That can happen, but it's still like a little bit neglectful is all I'm trying to say. But it doesn't mean that it's this huge disorder or an addiction or like any of these things. Like, I think it's important to not always put all that on it. Sometimes it's just you're not focusing on it, or you're not caring about it, or you're lazy, or you're overworked and you have to like rely on fast food a lot, for example. And it's very easy to overeat it. Like, that stuff is extremely common. And I don't think it's always complicated. But when it comes to, like I said, being very, very, very big, where you're basically arguing, well, we all die anyways, so who cares? That's a whole other level. And I think that that's something that I hope I can show in this podcast reaction. Like, that is a very radical statement she just made. That is a very disordered statement she just made. That's not a good way to look at eating. you just have to, it just has to be said. That is not normal. It isn't.
Just, it really is so telling to me, these very angry men on the internet who are just like, it, we're never gonna be good enough, right? We're never gonna be like good enough, a good fatty enough to be one of them, right? To be in their circle. Not that I want to be in these people's circle,
Yeah, I was
right?
gonna say the thing I most worry about, and I think this is the worst part you're talking about, is that internal good fatty bad fatty thing, right? Like, and that's what was coming up with you in your therapy sessions. Is it's one thing
So
to
again, I am always bothered, and I will keep saying it because they keep kind of repeating it. So sometimes when they repeat things, then I have to as well. They also have a social club. They also provide and push social pressure. And remember, within toxic ritualistic behaviors, one of them is to reinforce it in other people. It's not just an internal battle, it's also something that you enforce in other people. And again, to the point where when other people leave, it can feel like a betrayal. To the point where when certain people are in it, me saying these certain things that are exposing it can upset them. It can make them angry that I'm doing that because I'm doing the opposite. I'm basically doing the opposite of toxic ritualistic reinforcement. I'm shutting it down. That upsets some people because it's threatening the coping mechanism. That's what it is. So it's like, no. You guys provide pressure too. Your podcast is pressure. You're pushing ideas as well. You just don't like that somebody is pushing different ideas than you. That's all it is. And somebody is pushing against your coping mechanism primarily. That's why you don't like it. It's not about, weight loss is not about approval. That is a projection. It's a toxic ritualistic projection. It sometimes happens to me too. Because I do think there are people, again, fat acceptance ideology, and therefore B followed by E followed by D ideology, if you want to call it that, is very prevalent in American society. So if I am losing weight, there are going to be people who do not have any type of disorder, maybe have never even been fat, but they've just been so surrounded by a lot of this rhetoric, which again, it's been going on for quite a few decades that they've been pushing this rhetoric. When you look at someone like me, you may think that I'm losing the weight to please you, or that I'm doing weight loss to please other people. I constantly say on this channel, that is not my motivation. I do not care. That was never even anything in regard to why I got out of my disorder. None of it. I got out because I wanted to live, period. You know, I realized it, it all cemented, it all became clear, and I left it completely during 2020, and when I was completely isolated. In fact, to the point that I think the complete isolation starved me of the toxic ritualistic reinforcement, to a point where I could see what I was doing, I could completely understand it and leave it behind. So it's actually the absolute absence of other people in my life that led to me finally completely leaving the disorder. It has nothing to do with anyone else. It just doesn't. In terms of approval. When it comes to why I'm losing weight publicly and stuff, it's to fight this type of stuff. To fight the rhetoric that it is impossible to lose weight. If I do it publicly, visibly, loudly, and incrementally over a long period of time and show it happen, it disproves their argument. It disproves everything. That's what it does. That's why I'm doing it. But it's for an activistic purpose. It's not for approval. I'm not doing it for approval. Being an activist is not something you try to do for approval. The whole job is to piss people off, basically. It's to try to change minds. People don't like their minds to be changed. So it's fascinating to feel that projection upon me sometimes, because it could not be further from the truth. I am Once again, as I've said, this whole reaction, I am the bad fatty because I got out. That's being bad, according to them. That's the actual bad fatty. I am very rebellious within my weight loss. Not everybody has to be as extra as me. I totally get it. You know, not everybody is going to react to things the way that I do, but something like this, almost taking my life, oh, honey, it didn't get me completely, and I'm going to do my best to take it out or to get back at it or whatever. That's what it is, you know, and to try to, I don't want people to go as far as I did. I just don't. And it's just important. And it's not just about you fall by the letter D. It's about a lot of aspects with this. But this year it's really been about this. You know, this time period, I've really dived deep into this. And I think it's important because I kept seeing it. Through all the TikToks I reacted to. And I see it here too. And it needs to be brought to light. It just does. People have to understand the disordered basis of this movement because they need to stop taking it seriously. It isn't real. That's what's important.
Oh, how society's used as whatever, right? Like when you yourself struggle to feel worthy, unless you're performing on a timeline, it sounds like for you, like a timeline that maybe others expect or you expect of yourself, right? Then that's the deep hard stuff.
Yeah. Losing weight for approval will never get you to the end. It just won't, because there's going to be moments where you're by yourself. There's going to be the middle of the night. There's going to be nobody's around me. Nobody knows what I'm doing, right? You cannot sustain it. This is a point I've said many times on this channel because they often say you're losing weight for approval. We have to fight that idea. That is a toxic, ritualistic idea. That's not true. You can't even do that. You can't. Even if somebody is restrictive, it is often not for approval whatsoever. They are often not supported at all. That isn't real. And I can't stand it when they say things like this and your average person believes that to lose weight is to seek approval. It's horrifying to me. It's just horrible. It's horrifying because it's not true. It is not real. And you should not feel like you are just losing weight for approval. That may never have even crossed your mind. You might just be like, I just want to be healthier. I just, whatever. I mean, whatever. There's so many reasons that people lose weight. And they put this on people because they push it so much that your average people start to believe it. It's just horrible. It's not true. You can't. Because there's nothing stopping me from going and eating more right now or whatever. There isn't. It's based on my own goals. That's it. It has nothing to do. It's wild when they say something like that.
The deep hard stuff. I feel like people who don't know me cannot know me and not know how I deal with my own internal fat-phobic thoughts, and it's really hard to convey in words how I deal with it. I am past the days of not knowing if I'm worthy of love, respect, living my life how I want to live it, etc. I don't deal with worthiness concerns. What I deal with now is self-satisfaction, maybe. Okay. And that I do battle with the internal good fatty, bad fatty stuff.
I think that's fair. I don't think any of us are immune from that. I mean, you and I the other day.
Okay, well, it doesn't sound like she's really made any progress then. I'm just going to be real because I don't see what the difference is between my worthiness versus being a good fatty or bad fatty. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's not really giving much progress, in my opinion. I don't see how it's all that different. I would have asked her, how is that any different? What is the difference between the two? Because if you're really basing your decisions on if you're a good fatty or a bad fatty, are you really over it? It just doesn't make sense.
Talking about how we both were feeling some kind of way with our internalized fat phobia, right? And like I was sitting there, I don't know, spoiler alert if you haven't seen my Instagram or anything, but I've had a really kind of wild, shitty couple weeks, right? And I was feeling guilty because I'm like, but I just, I have this going on and this going on, this going on. My life is in shambles right now, but I'm sitting here resting and eating food, right? And like my internalized fat phobia was like, this, you're not being good. You're not being good. And it's like, no, I just.
If your life is in shambles and you're just sitting and eating, that's a disordered response. So she's describing guilt. Guilt is not useful within the disorder. You have to use logic. Logic is what is lacking. I will say it again. It is a disorder of the mind, not the heart and not the body. It's not logical to just sit and eat if your life is going to hell. You need to probably do something about that fact. You need to strategize and create a plan to mitigate any problems, to solve problems, and to step forward again. That's what needs to occur. Sitting and eating is not going to do that. It is not going to get you anywhere. It is illogical. That's the better way to look at it, because shame, people within the disorder, they play with shame. You play with guilt, you play with shame, you play with it, you use it. It becomes a very manipulated emotion. So it becomes something that you use to enforce the disorder and to create more drama around what you're doing, whether you're in a restrictive cycle or whether you're BINGing. So don't use it. Just don't even consider it. It's not useful. And again, I keep bringing up the addiction thing, but people use that label within the disorder to create shame and guilt around it to then fuel the cycles. It's not helpful. I do understand what you guys say. There are aspects of it that are very addictive seeming or are very similar. But when we call it an addiction, we're ignoring the whole picture, because the eating is one part of it. It's one piece of a huge puzzle. It would be like when you guys say that, I hear it's like calling somebody that has borderline an addict because they're afraid of losing somebody. Well, they're addicted to people. Sometimes people with borderline personality disorder, they can act very, very unwell, I'll just say, when it comes to that fear of abandonment. But that doesn't mean they're addicted to that person. It doesn't make sense. There's a whole other list of symptoms that are involved with that behavior. And it's the same thing within B followed by E followed by D. There's a whole other list of symptoms that are involved with it. One of them being restriction. I had one of you guys try to argue with me that restriction within BED is some kind of indulgence. And it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. That is a part of the disorder. Like I said, even if it's a very old diet that you did 20 years ago, you're still using it as a weapon to reinforce what you're doing today. It's still a part of it. It's a part of it. Because if you don't, like, I know I never have to do an overly restrictive diet again. I don't. So there's no drama. There's no need to be like, there's no scarcity mindset that you're creating in your brain using either current or past restrictive cycles. That's a part of it. It's a whole picture. And for me, that was what prevented me from getting out, is I didn't see that part, the R side, was still a part of it. I was so focused on the B side that I was ignoring the R side, and the R side was escalating further and further and further, and I was whipping back and forth. And this is happening a lot over 2019 because I didn't understand that this whole other part of the picture was there, along with the body image, the thoughts I had behind it. I don't care if I'm doing it healthfully or not. I just don't want to be fat anymore. I just can't stand being fat anymore. I don't care about my health. It's a body image aspect. You are not paying attention to the whole picture, and therefore you're not helping, which is why I will continue to bring it up. I don't care if it pisses you off. I do not care. I am not here to reinforce anyone's bullshit. There is a whole other aspect to this. And when you don't consider that, again, you can escalate it and escalate it. And I told you, I started weight cycling so dramatically, losing and gaining the same 80 pounds twice in 12 months. That's terrible. That is horrible for your health. It's terrible. It might not have been 12 months exactly, but it was like 14. I'll say it again. It was from September of 2018 to June of 2019. I lost 80 pounds. I gained it all back from June to October, and I lost it all again from October to February of 2020. And then gained it all back again by July of 2020. And that's because I didn't see the R side. Because I was only focused on this side, which is what you guys do when you say it's an addiction. You're only focused on this side, so you don't ever get out. Once it clicked, and I realized doing this overly restrictive diet that I'm doing, this is a part of it. I have to stop it. That's when I finally was out, and I never binged again because I had already done all this other groundwork. But it was a huge realization. And I had to sit down and tell myself over and over again, don't do that. It's not going to work. It has already failed 2 or 3 times. Don't do it again. It's not going to work. And I had to really fight it. You know, it wasn't... When I was first tempted to relapse, it was in summer of 2021, and I wanted to do keto again. Remember, it was way too much. Okay, just know, I'm not trying to throw any shade at keto. I understand that now. I understand it can work for some people within certain contexts and all that kind of stuff. But the way I did it, it was not healthy. And I wanted to. And that was the temptation that I had to resist. And I didn't do it. And then my appetite started to go down pretty soon after that, which again, I had been doing my prothyroid protocol and all these things. But if I had just gone into another cycle, it would have just happened again. So it is not just the B side. You have to really look at it and understand too, if you're sitting and obsessing over a diet you did 20 years ago, it's the same thing. Well, if I try to lose weight, then I'm going to do that. If I do, no, that's not necessarily true. You don't have to. That's not real. That's not real. And I will always advocate, do not hate your body. Do not sit there and agonize over your body in the mirror. I will say that every time. Every time. It's very important. Super important because it is just as much a part of the disorder as it is within a restrictive context, within that part of the disorders. You sit, you look in the mirror, you look at how fat you are every single day. It's just not a delusion. You're not delusionally thinking you're bigger than you are. You just are big. And you look at it all the time. And you go into every room and you think, gosh, am I the biggest person in the room? That's all a part of it. It's a whole picture. It's an entire system. Like I said, a more accurate way of looking at it is it's like a belief system. It's a toxic belief system because it's not just about behaviors. It's about how you think of things and how delusional you are in how you think of them. It's very important. And like I said, I literally had to tell myself, like, no, it will not work. You have to be very firm. It will not work. Do not do it. It has never worked. It will never work. Stop it. You have to be kind of aggressive with those thoughts. Again, you cannot affirm away this disorder. You can't be nicey nice about it. It doesn't go away. The thoughts are too sticky. And no.
I needed the rest, right? I mean, that's what you were talking about too. Just needing, it's okay to need rest. It's okay. It doesn't make you a bad fatty. It doesn't make
Rest is not binge. That's BS.
you a bad person. Like,
Yeah. All of this said about being a good fatty or a bad fatty, and just the idea around good and bad and where values are placed, I still aspire to be healthy in my fat body. And I aspire to be my definition of health, which is where I think it's really important to talk about.
So I think it's important to talk about the fear of death. That does come up when it's very severe. I mean, gosh, they really are touching on a lot of stuff in this too. I don't know, you guys, it's pretty wild. So oftentimes within the disorder, you know that you're going to die if you keep going. And so you try to think of ways to mitigate it. So a very common theme is like, well, if I'm vegan, then I won't die. Then I can eat as much as I want. That's a common one. That one's super common. I see that a lot within fat acceptance. And again, I'm not trying to comment on veganism in this discussion. I'm just not. Like, that's not at all what I'm talking about. It's the idea behind it. It's, if I'm vegan, then I can eat whatever and I'll be okay. And that's delusional. So people can have very severe nutrient deficiencies within this side of the disorder as well, where they're never eating certain things because they're scared that it's going to die, like it's going to make them die. So it could be somebody who's like, oh my gosh, well, I'm never going to eat red meat or something. So they never have it. So there's no nutrition there, that like they're missing out on that nutrition. Or it could be like, oh, I don't ever want dairy. They miss out on that. Oh, as long as I don't have carbs, then I can eat as much as I want. I can drink cups of butter. I can eat 6 pounds of hamburger. It doesn't matter because it's the sugar that's bad. You see, it turns really weird. And again, I'm not trying to project onto everybody like, oh, if you try carnivore, if you're a vegan, then that means you have a disorder. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying people within it, they use it to these crazy extents. They stretch it. She even said, my definition of health. Well, what about reality's definition of health? What about physical reality? I think that's something you should consider because, again, people within it, they will stretch and stretch and stretch. And I did that too, where mine was, as long as I'm not eating fat and carbs at the same time, then I'm not going to die. It's not true. It's not okay to be INGE. It just isn't. It's never going to be not deadly or not horrible for you. It's just not.
What health actually means to you as an individual.
absolutely.
Right? Because the gym bros who they think they're at the top of their health. To me,
hold on a second. Okay, sorry about that.
and just the idea around good and bad and where values are placed. I still aspire to be healthy in my fat body. And I aspire to be my definition of health, which is where I think it's really important to talk about what health actually means to you as an individual.
Absolutely.
Right? Because the gym bros who they think they're at the top of their health, to me,
it doesn't matter. Other people's health doesn't determine your health. So this is a very bad argument. Two people can be wrong at once. If gym bros, if they're doing things really badly, if they're overly restrictive, if they're using certain substances, all these different things, it isn't healthy. It's not. But it doesn't change the fact that what you're doing is unhealthy.
that is not me living a healthy life.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So I will even go as far to say, like, my family members who have diabetes, their version of health is not going to look like mine.
Yeah.
So I think that's a question where you really need to sit down for yourself and define what it is. But for me right now, that is not giving into any sort of restriction, any sort of dieting or diet culture conversations. It is being comfortable with body sensations. It's checking in on myself and giving myself what I need.
Do you actually feel okay at that size? I don't believe you do. I wouldn't even allow her to answer. It's BS. I'm sorry. It's outright denial. Because again, you can't sit here and say like, oh, I have this problem and I have that problem. I can't exercise because this, and that. But I feel amazing because what I'm doing is so healthy. Even if you have a condition, which again, I don't know her conditions, most conditions, the vast majority of conditions would be improved by at the very least even slightly normalizing your weight from where you're at. So for you to stretch the idea of your version of health to being very super morbidly obese, you have left reality a long time ago. And to try to argue that any kind of restriction, any kind of restriction, if somebody put rat poison in front of you, would you eat that? Because that would be a restriction, wouldn't it? Any kind of restriction. You have to be very illogical to say something like that. So I'm hoping that you guys can see the illogic behind what she's saying. There are sensible restrictions. There are so many sensible restrictions that exist. Having one candy bar versus 10, for example. That's a sensible restriction. I'm only going to have one. That's a sensible restriction. Can be totally sensible. Having a healthy amount of calories and restricting to that level of calories, that's sensible. You can be non-sensible. You can go way too far with restriction. That does exist. But to say any restriction, it's delusional.
It is going to therapy twice a week and seeing my dietitian and going to PT and working with
your therapist should be working with you with your B followed by E followed by D. Your dietitian should be very clear about the fact that you're eating way too much. And I think she said PT or whatever. I don't know if PT is going to have anything there to say really, but as far as like going to therapy in general, like sure. But it's not exactly like having certain emotional issues doesn't excuse BING. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. And you can go to therapy while you're on a sensible caloric deficit. There's nothing stopping that. So it's just irrelevant to the discussion, in my opinion.
Sleep doctor. Like, that is where my health is right now.
Yeah.
And yes, I have a desire to want to move my body. However, I wasn't allowed to for the couple of years. And there's a lot of other work that needs to happen right now in order for me to get to that place. So this last week, I don't know if we did we did do one episode we recorded. My back, I had a herniated disc in my back. I was sitting here, me and Allie were recording, had ice, literally a bag of ice on my back. For 2 weeks, I've had the most excruciating back pain. And through that, I was stretching my back and doing some PT exercises. I felt like such a badass. I said, look at me, I'm stretching. And I told Taryn, and Taryn said, yeah, you're taking care of yourself. Like, that's your version of health. And
yes, and normalizing your body weight is also taking care of yourself. So it's something that even if you, for some reason, could not do it right away, it's something that you should be taking steps towards being able to do as soon as possible. You should be working towards that goal immediately.
Actually started crying because I didn't think it was possible.
Yeah.
And that's where I put a lot of emphasis on define health yourself.
Just like now, you don't think it's possible to restrict in a healthy way. But that could be wrong as well.
And do not listen to the outside. Do not listen to diet culture. When I was in Chicago on vacation, we were walking. It was hot. We were eating such good food.
But you're still listening to your disorder. You're still listening to fat acceptance culture. You're not necessarily using your own mind. If you could be very blatant and very real with yourself, you probably would think, I feel like crap being this big and I need to do something about it. That would probably come to mind. If you really felt how you feel your whole body, you feel how awful your body feels, you would think coolly and logically, I need to lose some weight. More than likely. More than likely.
I was like, I don't want something heavy in me right now.
Yeah.
It's hot out. We're doing a lot of walking. I ordered a steak salad at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it was lovely.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. And it wasn't for anyone else other than I needed to eat. And the ingredients in that bowl were appealing to my taste buds.
Yeah.
Period. Done.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's the drastic overeating. That's the problem. So it's interesting. I have seen this a lot too, which I don't know if I ever did that part where it's like you take one snapshot of your diet and you try to use that as like, see, I'm okay. And you don't think about like the whole picture. I don't know if I ever did that. I probably did, but I don't remember it. I can't think of an example.
Nothing else to that conversation, you know? So I think if anything comes from, you know.
I probably said it to other people. I'm like, it's coming back to me. It's probably a lie or something that I did without really believing it. It was probably something I said to get someone off my back. I mean, you'd be amazed. I think, especially with BING, with that side, the lies are wild. They're wild, they're plenty. They can even be to yourself. Probably even more than the other side. And the, probably even more than the other ones. There's huge lies, constant lies, self-lies. It's constant. And so when people talk about it, it's the same thing of, I just don't eat that much. I eat less than my thin friends. And then they'll also sometimes say to other people who are bigger, well, you eat less than such and such. I remember one time I had a friend, and I think she may have had something going on. I don't know. But I remember she told me, she's like, my brother is thin and he eats more than you. And I had to be real with her. And I was like, no, I don't think he does. And she's like, no, I really think he does. I was like, no. It's like, just trust me. He doesn't. I don't think I said like how much I ate at the time, but it's like, it's not real. It's not true. So, but again, that's somebody saying that to someone else. That's what it is. So it's like if I wasn't really being critical, I'd be like, oh, you're right. You're so right. And I was like, no. Because I was getting aware. I think that was around 2014, 2015. I was getting aware of that something was afoot. Something was going on.
Really fat con and movement and this conversation, it is, we understand what society thinks good and bad, right? We've defined what that means to us. I think that is a pretty universal feeling to other fat folks. Now, what is that actually going to mean for us?
Can I call you out on something really quick?
Yeah.
Nice. I hear you a lot.
Nice.
I hear you a lot when we bring up movement, when we talk about movement.
Yeah.
A lot of times you throw in, I wasn't allowed to move. I wasn't allowed to move. I wasn't allowed to move. And to me, it almost sounds like you're like, I'm not doing this because of this, but I'm trying, like, it almost feels like you have to like give yourself this, I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say, but it's the way that you talk about movement, that you're excited about it, you're excited about the possibility about it, and what that looks like getting back into it. And then I hear you go, I wasn't allowed to move. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like to me, sometimes it comes out as like, well, this is why I haven't moved, because I wasn't allowed to, right? You don't have to have an excuse. You don't have to
Look at that reinforcement. So just know, if you want to get out, you will not be able to listen to this type of person in your life. You're going to have to say no, or you're going to have to just not talk to them about it. Because I'm telling you, people get pissed when you leave. It makes them mad. She's the type of girl where if that friend was like, you know what, I do need to lose it, I'm just so unhealthy, she would lose it. She'd go ballistic. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with describing the reasons why you can't exercise. I think at Supermorbid Obesity, there were plenty of times where I could not exercise. I was too tired. I was too sick. That can be frustrating sometimes. I do think people need to understand, when you are that big, you are ill. You can't do everything a thin person can. You can't do everything even, just a class 1 obese person can. You just can't. It's really difficult. There's often stop and go at the gym. I advocate for that for my super morbidly obese people. I say, in the audience or whatever, it's like, go to the gym for 3 months and then stop, and then try to go again later. It's okay to stop and go. I had to stop and go for really, I think 3 years. 2021, 2, and 3, I had to go and then stop. But I went 3 months in 2021, 3 months in 2022, 6 months in 2023, and then now I've just gone the whole year. Basically, I went the whole year. So it's done now. I don't have to stop anymore. But I'm also not super morbidly obese. So that stuff is okay, but And I don't think that there's anything wrong with explaining why you can't. You can just be like, oh, like, I'm really ill today. I'm really sick. Like, I'm exhausted. These are not disordered things. If you start to say, well, because Alan Roberts said something, that's why I'm not going to the gym. Okay, it's like, okay, we've gone into disordered, toxic ritualistic mindset land. Then we've left the planet and went somewhere else. That's when it gets stupid. But if you're talking about real physical things of why you can't go to the gym, there's nothing wrong with explaining that to somebody. It's perfectly okay. And it's important for the other person to understand. If they're talking from a physical perspective, it's probably real. People are very ill at that size. It's very real.
This is why I wasn't moving, right?
Well, I think I do that because I stress.
I think we're going to go ahead and try because I'm almost done. So we're going to just finish today.
How important movement is to me.
Sure.
So I think I am giving the context of why I lost that relationship.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense too. And now I hear it differently.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that.
Because
Yeah, because what you were saying was full of SHIT. So, just saying.
Did have movement taken away from me because I was compensating.
Okay.
Right? Like I was saying, oh, you're going to have me eat this much in a day. Like,
I have to move.
How much do I need to move my body in order to compensate that? Which is why they went, nope.
Okay.
You need every calorie you're intaking. Yeah. We're not going to lose anything.
So movement has started being a self-harm thing. And
oh my God.
And that's why I was taking harm.
Oh, it was part of the eating disorder for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, any type of diet, almost all of them will give you more calories to eat if you exercise because everyone would be passing out if they didn't.
Right.
And the goal...
Not at your size. That's not true. I do think that it's good to exercise, even from a very big size. I think it's just really helpful. But you have to think of it less in terms of calories burned, especially at a super morbidly obese level. I mean, let's be so for real. Your percentage of calories burned versus what you're eating and all this stuff, it's just so different. It's basically something you don't even really need to consider that much. It's more so about muscle, body comp is what's important. Typically, or very often, people who are super morbidly obese, they have very little muscle. That makes it really hard to lose the weight and to keep it off. So your muscle is going to help you so much. So you need to try to build muscle if it is physically possible for you to do so. If you are disabled or there's just all these other issues that I've talked about, then that's not exactly your path. And I understand that. But again, it needs to be a physical reason, not some weird psychological hoo-ha BS reason that is not actually a real thing. There are ways to exercise that are not in a self-harming way. Going to the gym, gently lifting some weight, slowly, not even getting out of breath. Often for super morbid, I'd be like, just don't even get out of breath. Just move. Just move. That's not harmful. That's extremely helpful. Move and try to build some muscle. That's what you want to do. And you can put on a lot of muscle that first year, especially because a lot of people are very atrophied. So you would be surprised as long as you're eating enough protein, which you typically can because you have a lot more calories to work with. So again, you have to look at it reasonably. I would not tell a SMO person, go on the Stairmaster, go run, go do this. No, I would not suggest that at all. Those things are really harsh. You don't want to gasp for breath when you're super morbidly obese. It's just not helpful. It creates more issues than it solves. I'll put it to you that way. And you don't want to get injured either. It's always better to do something modified or less harsh in a way where you're not going to get injured. Because getting injured is not productive. So no, obviously when you get to obese and beyond, and in some cases, like if you're really young, even morbid, you can probably do more stuff. And it doesn't matter as much. But I'm just saying, like, you know, obviously unless if you get into gross overtraining, which that's a whole other topic that I'm not going to get into because we just don't have the time. But when I was super morbid, I would go to the gym, I would work out. Sometimes I'd do full body. So it depends on what you want to do. But that's what worked for me. And then I would give it 5 days of rest after. So plenty of rest. Remember that rest is where the magic happens. And it would take a long time to recover in super morbid obesity. So I do think people have to think about it a little differently at that size. Now, being obese is totally different. It's not even similar at all. I can totally push myself a lot more. And it is a gradient, but just really be honest with yourself of where you're at and see what you can do, you know? And that was just the way that I did it. You could do it whatever way, but you could even just give yourself plenty of rest days in super morbid. It's fine. It still really helps. So, yeah. Anyways, let's continue.
Was literally one of the diets I was on was so harmful that it was like, how much are you intaking? Well, that's how much you need to be burning throughout the day.
Yeah.
Like, it needs to equal out at the end of every day, which is
Calories in, calories out.
actually insane.
Yeah.
That's a very, very restrictive diet that you do not have to do. That I have talked about in previous episodes, that often is taken on as a form of, you take it on specifically so that it will fail. That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
You know, like I talk about this stuff now and I hesitate saying it because I don't want to give anyone ideas. Right? Like I hate talking about specific diets because I'm like, don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Because the harm is irreparable. Irreparable.
And is there any harm in binging? Yes or no? That would be a question I'd ask. And I guarantee you, there would be some kind of, I guarantee you.
Close enough. You were there.
Thank you.
I think ultimately for me, it boils down to, it was one of my favorite clapbacks on my reel that went viral. And it was just, I had so many people telling me, you know, oh, you're so unhealthy, you're so unhealthy, you're so unhealthy. And it's like, you have no idea how healthy I am compared to the girl that used to think that she was better off dead than fat.
Yeah, 100%.
So.
100%.
No, I think you're probably the same, honestly. That's what I would say. I'd say I think you're just as bad, actually. So, because it's a spectrum, and you know, or you want to kind of be around the median here or whatever. You want to be at a healthy, happy medium. And you've gone way to like a whole other level. And she has this very strange like moral superiority about it. Like, I'm a better person because I'm fatter and I don't care. And that gets into like a competitive aspect, which is wild. And I don't want to get into it at this time, but I'm just saying she's not a better person because she's okay with being that big. That's really bizarre. And that's kind of what she was putting out there emotionally.
100%.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah. So, all of this to say, what the work that Philly FatCon is doing is amazing.
Yeah.
And people need a safe space to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because being fat affects every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
And for people who are currently working through internalized fat phobia and learning to be liberated in our own bodies, it brought up the ideal of good fat and bad fat, and what that actually means, and what the fuck health is.
Yeah.
And I really hope, and I feel like in my heart I already know, that so many people were positively impacted by going to Philly Fat Con.
Oh, absolutely.
And I really hope that the space that they created was life-changing and beneficial to so many.
Yeah.
And I'm also really interested to see what other opportunities they create over the next couple of years.
I love that.
Yeah. I think, since COVID, there's just been less big events like this, right? And it would just be exciting to see us, fat community, coming together to talk about more and more topics and to widen out kind of the conversations that get to happen with other fat people.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm really interested in seeing. And, I feel like we're doing our little bit of part with Charlotte Plus, but would love to show up.
A little bit.
Would love to go to like a big event or something soon, and just have. I just want to really have the deep conversations.
Yeah.
And get into things. So we'll just keep doing it here.
Yeah,
on this channel.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I think this has been life-changing for me. Just having two fat best friends, and I'm gonna start with that descriptor, but two fat best friends were just like me.
Wasn't there somebody else that was on there? Does anyone know the tea on that? Does anybody? Because I have a feeling she may not have gotten along. I feel like she's particularly bad, but she's just kind of a toxic person in my opinion. I think she's like kind of vicious. She's the more vicious one than the other two. The other two aren't as vicious in my opinion. That's just my opinions. I can be an aggressive girly pop myself, and I can see it in other people. Like I said, I've always said sometimes it takes a mean girl to see another mean girl. I can see it. That's you. I can be mean too, so I can see it in someone else. That's her. She's the mean one. She's the mean girl of the group.
And understanding, like, there's just so much more to this world than the size of my body. And you two have helped me with that. Charlotte Plus has helped me with that. The internet has helped me with that and harmed me with that. But it's just, it really is. I feel like it's such a new world when you decide that being a good fatty or bad fatty is just not anything to do with your self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. We made it. I'm probably definitely going to do more. But there's so much in it that it is kind of exhausting to do. But you guys did really like it, and I did too. And I do think that there's so much to cover in it. So I probably will do another one. I'll probably save the one where they talk about the holidays. I'll probably do that for the holidays this year. But I'll have to do another one soon, for sure. But this was wild. I'm really shocked at this podcast. I'll put it to you that way. I still wonder, like, let me know if you guys know what happened. I know this is bad, but that part of me wants to know, like, what if there was any tea on what happened to the fourth one. I'm pretty sure that that's this podcast. If I'm wrong, then I'm flopping. I'm sorry. It must have been a different podcast. But if it is them, do you guys know what happened? That's my question. I will talk to you guys again later. Have a good one. Peace.